All right, so in this video I'm going to be talking about inverted fair value gap, the difference between fair value gap and inverted fair value gap. So inverted fair value gap is simply a fair value gap that actually got disrespected. So since it gets disrespected, that fair value gap is now invalid, hence it is now called an inverted fair value gap. All right, let me take you to my charts and show you all of that. But before I show you example of inverted fair value gap, I have to show you example of normal fair value gap. So for a normal fair value gap, we actually have a bullish fair value gap and a bearish fair value gap. And as you can see, this is a bullish fair value gap. A bullish fair value gap is actually created when there's much more buyers than sellers. So the buyers outpower the seller, and hence a space is created between three consecutive candles. As you can see, is a bullish fair value gap. So the buyers were more stronger than the sellers, and then price created this gap. And as you can see, price actually came back to fill this gap before what's going back up. So a bullish fair value gap will actually act as a support for continuous buys, and it also acts as discount buys. You understand? So price coming into this bullish fair value gap now act as a support and act as a discount, so the buyers can actually buy cheaper. Now for a bearish fair value gap, look at this now. Something like this is an example of bearish fair value gap. Now look at this. Price actually came into the fair value gap and then they traded down. Exactly. So this is a bearish fair value gap. So a bearish fair value gap will act as resistance for further sales. Exactly. But now when you are talking about inverted fair value gap, I have an example here. Look at inverted fair value gap. Now, inverted fair value gap, as I've said earlier, it's a fair value gap that gets disrespected. A fair value gap that is meant to hold, but instead of holding, it did not hold. Price just disrespected it as if it doesn't even exist. Now, look at this now. This is a bearish fair value gap. Now, a lot of sellers or a lot of traders will actually be expecting that, okay, when price come into this fair value gap, that they will sell or they will add to their sell position. But look at what price did. Instead of price should come inside this fair value gap and then continue selling further, price completely disrespected this fair value gap. Now this fair value gap that got disrespected now is going to be called bullish inverted fair value gap. Originally it was meant to be a bearish fair value gap, but a bearish fair value gap that gets disrespected is now called a bullish inverted fair value gap, and now it will now act as support for further buys. Its original plan before was for it to act as resistance for further sales, but you can see it gets disrespected. And what makes it get disrespected is that price traded through it. Price is not meant to trade through a bearish fair value gap, but a bearish fair value gap that gets traded through is called a bullish inverted fair value gap. As you can see, this is it. Now what about a bearish inverted fair value gap? I have an example of that. All right, look at this. This is actually a bearish inverted fair value gap. As you can see, a bearish inverted fair value gap is simply a bullish fair value gap that gets disrespected. Price is bullish and then price created a gap. Now a lot of traders will be looking at this gap and expecting that, oh, price should just come inside this gap, fill it, and then continue bullish. So they'll be expecting that this fair value gap should act as support for further buys and for discount buys also. But look at what price did. Price completely disrespected this fair value gap. So since price has disrespected this fair value gap, this is no longer a bullish fair value gap. Hence, it is now called a bearish inverted fair value gap. And what does that mean? That simply means that we are no longer bullish again. Smart money had already changed structure from bullish to bearish, and they are no longer interested in buying again, but now they are not interested in what selling. So this fair value gap can now act as what resistance for further sales. Exactly. So I believe you are able to understand the difference between inverted fair value gap and a normal fair value gap. See you in my next video.